Hi everyone. So this session is going to focus on when you might want to consider moving from using assumptions and proxies to more primary data. It's really common to rely on using proxies and assumptions, spend-based data, that sort of thing, when we first calculate carbon footprint. It's a quick and it's a very acceptable way to get a sense of where your biggest impacts are, but they're more indicative than exact. And you can only really reduce your impacts if you really know what they are. So we tend to, over time, try to make the footprint more built on that primary data and using less and less assumptions, particularly if those impacts are material to you. The other thing is we often find that the proxy data or assumptions will often overestimate impacts, not always, so don't rely on that, but it's helpful to get the right numbers. So as a simple example, we're going to look at rail travel. So staff generally buy their own tickets and claim them back through your expenses system. That's likely to mean it's quite easy for you to work out the total spend on rail travel by month or by year or by day, if that's what you want to do. But you won't know what the distance travelled was, and you've only got to go and buy a rail ticket to know that you can pay a much higher price on one day for a ticket than you would on another day. So if we're using a spend-based factor, we're unlikely to get an accurate answer. So very often a company will start by using that spend data because it's easy to get from the finance system. If it looks as though it's a material impact, one of your bigger impacts, then you might want to start thinking about how we get better data. So there are different ways you can do that. Some platforms you can use, some corporate travel agents will actually give you data. The other way you can sometimes do this is to change some flags in your expenses system. So your staff might need to specify the start station and the end station they used, and then you can use various processes to automatically calculate the distance between the two. You then use those distances and you get a much more accurate footprint. Spend data is also really commonly used when we first do a sort of a deeper dive in scope 3 impacts. So particularly when we look at purchased goods and services and capital goods. So again, we tend to have data in the finance system at a fairly rolled up level that would let us see how much we spent on accounting, how much we spent on data hosting, how much we spent on buying these materials or these external services that we need. There are spend-based emission factors for these, which are developed by international organizations and universities that simply say, on average, for a given year, if you spend £1 million on this thing, it'll have a carbon emission of that. So we can then plug that into a footprint tool and get a sense of where those big impacts are. And just as we talked about previously, what we then do is look at that and see where those biggest impacts are. And if, for example, we saw that it was the procurement of your raw materials, which is probably quite likely if you make products, then you might want to look into it in a lot more detail. So we'll sometimes find that there might be a top 3, top 4, top 5, maybe top 10 carbon impact areas. So we can focus on those rather than everything in your purchase ledger that would take forever. So let's look at one for events. So perhaps you're a big company, you're running international sales events that happen all over the world, and your initial estimate of just taking that £2 or £3 million that you spend every year is estimated it's going to be 40% of your carbon footprint, the biggest single component. Great to know, not very accurate, doesn't help you plan your impact reduction. But now you've got somewhere to start, so we can break that down into much more detail. So you might start by thinking about what your events are comprised of. So we know there'll be some food and drink. We know there'll be some venue hire that's using energy. Maybe you've hired some visual equipment or merchandise that's been bought for your staff to wear or to give away as gifts, those sorts of things. And of course, there'll be travel for people to and from the event. So now you know roughly what you might comprise an event. Now you can go and talk to the individual companies that provide that. You can go and talk to the event vendors and find out if they can tell you how much energy they use during your 1-day, 3-day event. You can talk to the food providers to understand the carbon impacts of the food. Are they serving perhaps vegetarian food, which will have a lower impact? Can they give you really good data around the weight of individual ingredients? It's not uncommon, and it could be really important for you to do that. So now you've got this sort of data, you can plug that into a footprint tool with much more accuracy. And again, it will help you see which the most material thing is. So it might not be the energy running the conference center, it might just be the food. Then you can think about the so what. What can we do with that? So going forwards, we might want to specify that our events don't have meat or they're dairy free, whatever it might be. You can start to specify that. You can build it into your supplier contracts, into your request for proposals from suppliers, and really start to have some impact.